Hello, I'm Nolan West. I'm your state representative. Well, if you live in the lane, I am. While I was campaigning the last year or so, a lot of people asked me what a state representative is. Do I go to Washington during the week? So I thought, hey, it might be a good idea to do a little video explaining, the inner workings of state government. I'll give a little picture here of what it is to get a bill passed in the Minnesota House and signed into law. If you've seen Schoolhouse Rock, you know the rudimentary basics. But when you factor in all the different voices, it actually gets pretty complex. But the first thing you do, say I want to have a bill become a law, come up with an idea, and then I contact the revisor's office. Now, you might know that most of your legislators, myself included, don't have a law degree. So you don't want people without law degrees writing statute. So we have people in the top floor of the office building that we ask them, hey, I want to do this idea for a bill. And they say, well, here are the obvious pros and cons. They're very balanced and nonpartisan. And then if you decide to go forward with it, they'll draft up a bill. They'll even draft up a bill that they think is a horrible idea. After that, you'll get the bill show up at your office, and it'll be 4 copies of it. 2 copies for the House, 2 copies for the Senate. So you have to go find your own co-authors. Obviously you'll be the chief author, but if you want other people to sponsor the bill, you have to go say, here's my bill, sign on to this. And then you also have to find a Senate author. So you have to go over to the Senate and hopefully find somebody who is willing to carry your bill in the Senate. After you're happy with your co-sponsors and whatnot, then you drop the bill in the hopper and it gets introduced on the House floor. Now, on the House floor, after the first day on the House floor, it'll get a House file number, and it'll be available online for everybody to see. Then it gets to assign to a committee. Now you can choose, you have some control over what committee it starts in, but depending on what area of law it changes, it has to go through the committees that cover whatever area of law it is. If it changes public safety statute, it has to go through the public safety committees and so on and so forth. And you'll work your way through the committee process. Now the committee process is where some real work gets done. You'll bring your bill up, but first you have to ask the chair. Now this is when politics starts, basically. Chairs have essentially complete autonomy on what bills go in and out of their committees. So if the chair of the committee doesn't like your bill's probably not going anywhere. Or if the chair of the committee is from a different party than you are, you're going to have to work 10 times as hard to get your bill heard. Say you're lucky, most bills don't get heard, but say you're lucky and your bill gets heard, it shows up in committee and they let you know what day it is, and you'll line up testifiers to say why the bill is good, if you need outside help, or if it's a bill about some technical issue, you want to make sure you have experts trained in whatever field is necessary for the questions you'll think you'll get. Once you sit down in the committee room, you'll have Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other side, chair in the center, and they'll ask you questions. Now typically members from the other party will ask you critical questions, and members from your party sometimes they'll throw you a softball here and there, although sometimes you don't all agree in your own party, and there's plenty of drama to go with that. After the committee process, so you negotiate it there, you get questions, and they can amend your bill, you can amend your bill, but eventually the goal is to get it passed out of committee. And it'll either be passed out of a committee to another committee, or it'll go to the House floor or the General Register. Now, once it clears all the committees, it'll be on the General Register. On the General Register, it sits there until the Rules Committee decides to bring it up on the floor. Now, lots of bills never leave the General Register, but we can't go over everything, so we'll just go. Say your bill gets scheduled to be on the floor by the Rules Committee. And then when it's on the floor, the Speaker will bring it up. You get up and you address, this is my bill, this is what it does. You might, if something changed in the process, you'll cover that. And then typically, if it's lots of bills pass with unanimous support, if you make a good case in committee, there's a good chance your bill will pass with 0 votes against. But most bills have some sort of disagreement. That's why the law needs to change. So you pitch your bill and then you debate it on the House floor. Now, then once the debate on the House floor is over, you pass it over to the Senate. Now, when the Senate receives your bill, the bill also, before they can take it up on the Senate floor, has to go through the Senate committees. So say it does that, and the bill that the Senate comes up with is different, because it gets amended differently in the committee process. Say it's different when it finally gets to the Senate floor. Then the Senate can either amend the bill to be identical to the House bill and pass it, and then it goes straight to the governor. But if the Senate wants to keep their version, and usually both sides want to keep their version, and there's some sort of negotiation that has to happen for the final product, they can amend the bill and amend the bill differently than the House and send it back to the House. And when it gets to the House, they have the same option. They can either agree to the amendments and send it to the governor, or if they don't agree to amendment, that's when it goes to conference committee. Now, conference committee is where things get, well, a lot of politics happens. We'll just put it that way. It's a very abused process, I would say. So in conference committee, you either have 3 or 5 House and Senate members together, appointed by the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, and they negotiate the final bill. Now, this is where you can have the bill go into conference committee about, lake algae, and it can come out as a bill that amends, the transportation bill that funds every road in the state. It's an abuse process by both parties, I would say. So in the negotiations, so you have 3 or 5 House members, 3 or 5 Senate members, and they negotiate. And basically anything can happen at that point. They can bring in new language that's never been heard anywhere. They can bring in language. The rules say you're supposed to bring in language that if you're going to put anything in, it has to have cleared the committee process in at least one of the bodies, but that doesn't always happen. Once the conference committee agrees, they send what's called a conference report back to each body, and they have to approve it. Now, the biggest difference and why a lot of people like to use conference committees is because when you send it back to the floor, it can no longer be amended. It's just an up or down vote, which, 1, that way it doesn't get meaninglessly attacked, but 2, now you don't have nearly as much say if you weren't on the conference committee. But that's the way the system works. So if you find it gets back and everybody supports it, then you finally send the bill to the governor, and then the governor can veto or sign it into law. Or he can let it become law without a signature. That happened to one of my bills. But that's kind of the lowdown of how a bill becomes a law in the Minnesota House. Now, I skipped over plenty, but I feel like that gives a decent picture. You come up with the bill gets introduced, it has to go through the committees, then the House and Senate have to agree, and if they don't agree, it goes to a conference committee, and then that conference committee will send the final product, which will go back to the House and then to the governor. Hopefully this was helpful. I don't know. We'll see. But if people seem to enjoy learning about this, I will continue making videos because, as you can see, I'm quite the nerd. I already have all this nonsense to do so. So you just let me know. Thanks for listening.